Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Fred Crouch. You're listening to The Property Wizard, which is now part of the Knack for Business podcast family. Real estate questions, real estate answers. Whether you're buying, selling, investing, or just curious, you're in the right place. For more details about me and today's guest, check the show notes. Let's get into it. So, Bernie, that was quite a podcast we had featuring Joe Neurotter when we discussed investment strategies in the Dominican Republic. What did you think about that one?
It's interesting when you're not in a place and someone's talking about it being developed, and you realize, hey, hurricane season, is it going to affect you? No, because we're on high ground. I like that story, and you're on the right side of the island. But it's fascinating. What we take for granted here isn't necessarily what happens there, but they are eager to grow real estate assets in that area. And so there's a lot of opportunities. If you go in with a good intent, there are opportunities there. And in fact, I think we even thought that there might be the ability to do retirement homes of some sort in that space because, hey, who wouldn't want to be there?
Yeah, as the conversation progressed, I think we made a pretty good argument, but Joe was already aware of that. Joe's been dealing with, this hotel since he was a teenager. And he's not a spring chicken today, but he most certainly has taken it about as far as I think he can take it. But he was overall generally optimistic about the investment scenario down there, the possibilities. So it was good. I think it was and will be a good podcast for those of our listeners that are considering, that as a foreign investment venue.
I think the one part that was really interesting about what he was saying, do your ground research, not research, but be on the ground and have chats with people.
Like any other investment, we spoke about this before, how often I've said this. It's very difficult to manage an asset, real estate based anyways, if you're not there, if you don't have, boots on the ground. If you're a single investor, it's particularly challenging to invest in a property in Calgary or Vancouver in this country anyways, or in California, for instance, or in Florida, unless you've got good, strong management behind you. So it's a little different when we start talking about co-tenancies. And I think that's one of the reasons why, a lot of our listeners kind of lean that way. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I think he's been far more successful since he started committing and spending time down, in the DR. Anyways, let's move on. Listeners, we're pleased to have with us today Nick Hill, a commercial mortgage broker, real estate investor, and one half of the dynamic duo who host, along with Daniel Foch, Canada's #1 real estate podcast, The Canadian Real Estate Investor. Nick has a wealth of experience and knowledge dealing with all things real estate related, from financing your next development project to what markets are worth investing your hard-earned investment dollars into. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. Wow.
Ah, well, I could have gone Welcome, on, everyone. quite frankly, ad
Hi, I'm
nauseum.
Fred
You had to
Crouch. You're
really
listening to
tailor
the
it down.
Property
Let's
Wizard.
not do that.
Which is so I have to ask you, because you've got such a background. You're a mortgage broker, you're a real estate investor, and now, quite frankly, a prominent podcast voice in Canada. How did all those roads lead to one another?
Oh, man, that's a big question. I'll start where I guess all things kind of started. So I have a background in kind of starting my own businesses, a background in construction, and spent some time in commercial real estate in Toronto as well. And nearing the end of my kind of more corporate career, suit every day to the office type of stuff, I was fascinated with the idea of buying duplexes and small multifamily properties. I'd been listening for years obsessively to the Bigger Pockets podcast, which I'm sure some of your listeners will be familiar with. And if not, I'd recommend that they go check it out. It went on an incredible run for the better part of a decade, and I listened to every episode. And what that trained me to do was a few things. One, I knew that I was circulating real estate. I was in it as a profession, but I wasn't investing in it as an asset. So it taught me that's where, real wealth can be made if done correctly and fairly simply as well. And look, I'm a simple man at the end of the day. So I liked the idea of that. That was the first step. It also taught me that things in different countries, in different provinces, different states are all very different. And I was listening to this podcast and hearing the returns that they were getting, things like the 41 exchange, just all these mechanisms that and financial products that exist south of our border here in Canada, and thinking, and then going and looking them up and thinking, okay, well, that doesn't exist here. So why isn't there a podcast for Canada? And of course, there were several real estate podcasts for Canada, but none really in the way that Dan, my co-host, and I wanted to kind of have the cadence that we have now, which is really data driven, taking studies, taking anything from like Stats Canada, CMHC, the Bank of Canada, Collier's cap rate reports, all these different types of really in-depth reports, and distilling them down to so the average Canadian, the average investor, the average real estate curious person can go and understand them. So that was the next piece. And then actually during kind of right before COVID, I bought my first duplex maybe a year or two before. And then as COVID got closer to actually happening, I ended up getting laid off. I had started another business very quickly, and I had started to buy more properties. So I actually bought properties before I was a mortgage agent. And I was looking at my mortgage agent during that time period, being like, okay, well, I've done the construction piece, I've done the real estate piece, I'm pretty good at both, but the money seems to be, I need to get closer to the money. I need to understand the financial price. I need to understand amortization and fixed versus variable mortgages and all this stuff, because that's really, if you can understand the finances behind real estate, you'll understand how to make money. Yeah. Owned a couple properties. I became a mortgage agent because I was like, oh, I own properties now. This is great. I was essentially unemployed. I had a small business at the time, but not, not your standard paycheck. And I was like, okay, well, I own a bunch of real estate now, but I feel broker than ever, right? I'm house rich, but I'm not surviving off the cash flow. I gotta go get a job
I
here.
hear you.
So I thought, what better to do than become a mortgage agent? Did that, and about a year into doing that, I met my now co-host. We started a podcast together called Brick and Mortar. It lived in relative obscurity online, but it was a ton of fun. It taught us how to conduct ourselves on a podcast, how to interview people, how to break down data, how to speak with one another. Anyways, we did that for about almost a year, and then we had an opportunity to join a much larger network that found out about us, and that's the Canadian Investor. So they cover, capital markets, stocks, and they were getting a ton of questions about real estate. They didn't know what they were talking when it came to this asset class, and we jumped on board, and it's really just been a roller coaster since then. We're over 4 million audio downloads, and I think approaching a million on kind of other mixed media platforms. We've got to interview billionaires, Dragon's Den, ex Dragon's Den people. We've traveled the entire country multiple times hosting events, and it's really just been an awesome journey. So that's kind of how all those things intersected. I was listening to bigger podcasts for a long time, wanted to get into the podcast game, thought it was necessary in Canada, was buying properties, became a mortgage agent. And, all these years later, here I am.
And what a story. Who was your best interview or most interesting? Who was your most
Yeah.
interesting interview?
We had the opportunity to go in, which this was probably the coolest experience. Chip Wilson, the billionaire founder of Lululemon, one of the wealthiest Canadians. I was born and raised in BC. He's in BC. His first Lululemon store was a couple kilometers away from where I was born. Funnily enough, I actually was living out in BC in Vancouver in my early 20s, and my friend had a catering company, and she got this crazy catering gig she couldn't tell anyone about. And it was actually at his house for his wife's 40th birthday party, where they called in the Red
Yeah.
Hot Chili Peppers to play a private show. So it was very
Wow.
serendipitous. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Very serendipitous for me to be able to interview him live at his office and spend a couple hours with him well over a decade later. And just a fascinating person full of amazing advice, and still probably, I think, one of our most, if not our most downloaded and listened to episodes.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, it was
Now,
cool.
for those listeners that aren't familiar with a 1041 exchange, do you care to walk us through exactly what it is? It's an
I'm
American.
probably Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
probably not the best person to talk about the intricacies of it, because I've never
Yeah.
conducted one myself, because I'm strictly a Canadian investor. But essentially, from my understanding, is you basically are able to essentially transfer your wealth through real estate into larger real estate assets, being very
Capital
tax
account.
sheltered and capital gains protected and stuff. Whereas here in Canada, we get taxed to death on just about everything, and
Absolutely.
it feels sometimes like they don't like entrepreneurs or high earners or business owners, which is crazy to me, because, and nothing against people that work, quote unquote regular jobs, but there is a lot of work and stress and grit that it takes to be an entrepreneur, a business owner. someone who's even on commission sales kind of thing. So
Absolutely. Thanks for that. A 1041 exchange allows you to transfer the equity on the sale of an asset into a similar asset at no tax cost in the US. That's a nutshell of what it actually is. It's an incredible advantage to those who want to keep their real estate investment dollars in real estate. So at the end of the
exactly.
day, you only really get nailed by the folks at the IRS should you completely cash out of your real estate asset. So, anyways, thank you very much for that. Bernie,
Well, Nick, wow! Congratulations on the downloads. That's pretty outstanding. There.
Thank you.
Almost going to ask you. So, what's your day job now? Are you brokering? Are you podcasting? Or are you juggling several plates at the same time? Where's your main what's your main space?
Yeah, it's a bit of a well orchestrated circus over here. You know, doing all these things for years and having exceptional people around me in support systems and support staff and partnerships. I'm actually able to conduct quite a few things. I mean, I still work like 60, 70 hour weeks to be honest, but I love what I do. So the three main things that get my attention primarily is commercial mortgage brokering. So my clients are doing large transactions, 2, 10, 20 million plus in a lot of cases. And these are very complicated deals. The sales cycle is quite long, minimum 6 months, upwards of years in some cases. So that takes up a lot of my time. I'm able to help clients across Canada. My partners and I at Build Financial have built a really incredible team, and we can get into that later. So that's the kind of the main component. I do spend about 1 day a week kind of creating content. So that's my day today. I'm on with you, lovely gentlemen. And then I've got three podcasts that we're doing later today between Dan and I.
wow.
Yeah, so usually 1 day a week, we've got it kind of down to a science. 1 day a week, we release 2 episodes a week, and it takes a couple hours to prepare the episodes. We do them, about half scripted, if not a bit more, just because we cover so many data heavy studies and whatnot that we want to make sure that
Notice that.
our
Yeah.
yeah that we want to make sure that our listeners are getting nothing but value in the 35 to 45 minutes that they donate to us. And then the other thing that I'm lucky enough to do which is really just kind of taken off this year. We've been building it for the last couple of years slowly. Is an events business, which I really never thought I would be part of. But this year, for instance, so we've done 2 out of our 4 events this year. One of them in Vancouver, one of them in Edmonton. We have one coming up in September 15th in Toronto, and then another one in Montreal later this year. And those events, we have speakers and sponsors and panels. They're at really cool venues. The ticket price and everything is amazing. Like we're not there just trying to sell you a course or shill anything out. It's a room full of amazing people, and we usually get about 250 to over 300 attendees for
Amazing.
those. So that's how I divide my time.
On
That's
any of your topics, do you ever touch anything that's like a hot button? South of the border, AI data centers are like, really a hot topic. But I mean, that's the flavor of the day. Do you have other issues that you bring up in your podcast that are like, okay, you want to do this, and how's that going to pan out?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we try to be very kind of nonpartisan. We've covered, for instance, both parties' housing plans, right? We had both housing ministers on from both sides of the aisle. We have done episodes on data centers. An episode that it was like, "Can Elon Musk save Canada?" kind of thing, right? A little clickbaity title right there. But we try to, we don't really put our personal opinions in. We don't inject them into our we're really just there to present well researched information in a very easy to understand fashion. But yeah, I mean, we cover all the hot topics, any new bill that's passed, anything having to do with the landlord tenant board. I'm a tenant and a landlord, so I think we're able to provide some really good perspective on some of these kind of issues without again having a very clear agenda. For me personally, we've seen a lot of people and other social media creators and podcasters here in this country swing one way or another or get quite political. And look, it works for some people, and so be it. Politics for me are something I like to keep semi-private. And I don't think I'm not a political commentator. It's not my job to be out there saying what I believe in or don't believe in. So we keep it professional and we keep it to real estate. But of course, we touch on all the hot button topics. We have to.
just the facts, man.
That's
Quote
it.
that
That's it,
dragnet,
baby.
right?
Just the facts. Yeah.
Just the facts. With in Canada, anyways, GDP slowing. which it appears to be doing, and the Bank of
Mhm.
Canada holding rates, frustratingly, at least from my perspective, and Kuzma under review, how should Canadian investors, in your opinion, be thinking about where the real opportunities are right now?
Yeah. Look, I mean, not only everything you said is of course completely accurate, Fred, but I think we're the only country in a technical recession, the G20 now, and technical recession. Okay, sure. From our perspective, we've kind of been in a recession for probably quite some time. Certain things have been propped up and boosted up to avoid that. And I think the term vibe session, which became popular a couple years ago, I think that's really the main like it's that's the sentiment is what moves the market. It's what gets people off their
Absolutely.
couches and back in the
Yeah,
stores and back producing and back taking risks. And we don't have that right now. So not only are we in a technical, financial economic recession, I think we're also in still in that vibe session. So this presents an interesting scenario for people. So it really comes down to who you are, where you are in life, and what you are trying to accomplish. If I am a young person right now, yeah, look, and I still consider myself young. I'll be 37 this year, but let's say 20 to 40, 20 to 45 kind of thing. This is the time for people with ambition to start taking some risks and to get out there. I know it
absolutely.
sounds counterintuitive because everything is
You're
so
right.
hard right now, but this is where money is made. This is where opportunity is found. When you're in a recession, there's more problems than ever, and you get paid in accordance with the amount of problems or the size of problems you solve. So go
Absolutely.
solve some problems right now.
Absolutely.
From a strictly real estate perspective, I would say, look, it's always a good time to do a good deal. Okay. And the one thing that never gets out of style in real estate is finding good deals. So if you are a young person that I'm talking to and you are looking to get into real estate and you're like, I've got 8,000 bucks, what the hell do I do? Don't go spend that on a course. Don't go try to, borrow a bunch of money from friends and family. Go do the hard thing and find a deal and bring it to an investor. Spend your time networking. So this is for me. If you're young and trying to get started, that's what I would be doing, and that's what I did. When I was younger. If you are an existing investor that has a portfolio, this is really the age of the operator. You need to be. It's similar to a business owner, right? You need to be looking at your margins. You need to be looking at where can we cut, where can we save, where can we pull back, what can I take on, what's a luxury that was nice in, the bull run that is not necessary right now. You should be implementing AI. You should be trying to, use as much technology to make your business run smoother and leaner through these times. We see a lot of people panic selling and stuff right now. And I get that. People are in really, really tough scenarios. So this is not me, I'm not saying hold on for dear life, never, team never sell, all that kind of stuff. Every situation's different. But if you are a property owner, I think it's the age of the operator. And the last people I'll touch on is if you are a serious investor, an active investor, someone with money, someone with enough of a risk tolerance to match your capital, now is the time to buy. And I'm not
Absolutely.
saying that to be a bull. I'm not saying that to get business. I'm saying that because I work with and see a lot of serious real estate investors and professionals across the country, and they are all making moves. The real
Absolutely.
ones right now are making moves. And a lot of other people are in damage control. So if you fall into one of those three categories, that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a brilliant synopsis. Thank you very much for that. We're very fond of saying on our show that if there are no problems, Bernie,
There are no opportunities.
yeah, we start the show and finish the show with that all the time.
There you
So
go. I love it.
we're hearing you, but that's been my experience as well. Very little at the lower end of the market going on, but the large players, the players that have cash to whom financing isn't really a problem. They're making moves on much large portfolios because they can, and the market's reflecting that. So they can usually get very favorable terms from a seller. So brilliant. Well spoken. Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
that.
So we talked about, yeah, young and upcoming. So what about the older and outgoing? Are the boomers influencing the market, or is that a silver tsunami floating around
Oh,
that's making things kind of go, hmm?
the boomers are a very interesting they provide a lot of interesting data points in today's Canada. I I have so many stats floating around in my head that pardon me if I butcher these, but and I might not even use exact numbers, but most boomers in Canada own their home outright and or have very little mortgage left on it. That is a massive data point right there. That those same homes are for the most part largely empty, meaning that, you've got a 5-bedroom house, you're really only use or 4-bedroom house, right? Even a 3-bedroom house, you're really usually only using the 1 bathroom, the kitchen, the living room, and the bedroom. We've studied, like, heat maps of how Canadians, Americans, and Australians, who have the 3 biggest square foot per capita, globally, we've studied how they use their homes, and, there's millions of empty bedrooms, here in Ontario alone, and well over 10 million in Canada as a whole. So, the boomers, wealthiest generation, there's a lot of I don't even know the word to use here. There's a lot of commentary that goes back and forth in the market about, the easiest generation, blah, 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 blah. Look, every generation's different, right? I think that, in a lot of ways, it's easier to be more successful, in today's day and age, utilizing the proper things and having the right combination of soft and hard skills for people to be successful. But, the boomers also present a lot of interesting opportunities. If you are a boomer that owns a bunch of real estate, I would be probably holding right now because it's not a good time to liquidate unless you absolutely need to, in which case do again, and the same advice goes again, like, this is the age of the operator, right? If you've owned these buildings for quite some time, which is the case in a lot of the transactions we're seeing, right? Some person in their mid to late 60s all the way into their 80s that has owned a large multifamily building for 30, 40 years kind of thing, right? They bought it during the MERB program of like the 70s and 80s even.
I'm surprised you even know about that. Yeah.
Yeah, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
again kinda similar to the CMHC MLI Select product that I
Okay.
that I use a lot right now, but, yeah, and I think from people looking at boomers and thinking, "Where is this gonna go?" Well, I mean, again, I think there are a lot of potential issues, just funding what it's gonna cost, and this is we're seeing this in Europe and, across the world with aging populations and not enough of a younger population to essentially support these aging people, financially, physically, and to house them. So, I think there's a ton of opportunity for boomers themselves or for other generations to come in and, kind of capitalize. It might not be the right word, but you guys know what I'm saying. Seize the opportunity of
Take
what
advantage.
is going to
Yeah.
take advantage. Like, what's going to happen to all these people that are in these large homes that don't want to maybe sacrifice the style and the comfort of what they've had for a long time? Well, the product that they're looking for doesn't exist. Okay, so I think there's going to be a massive boom in new style of retirement living, retirement communities. We're already seeing that. There was some crazy stat that like the best performing REIT of the last few years, real estate investment trust for investment vehicle that you can buy. The best performing REIT was a seniors housing REIT. So
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
a massive amount of opportunity there. We also see a lot of the boomers moving to interesting parts of Canada, kind of looking for more affordability in a lot of cases, right? We see a lot of interprovincial migration to the prairies and to the beautiful provinces on the East Coast. So, I think it's an interesting opportunity. The other thing about the boomers is the ones that want to stay in the cities, Toronto, Calgary, the major cities, Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, Vancouver, Ottawa, they want to age in place, they want to stay in these homes. Well, this is where the opportunity of multiplexing properties becomes very, very interesting as well, right? You bring in a financial partner and a general contractor, and you can turn your single family home in inner somewhere in the city into ideally a 5 or more unit building, get incredible financing on it, be able to essentially condominiumize and sell some of those units, recoup your money, and then have rental income from the others while also still living there, or have your sons or daughters or whatever and have that kind of multi-generational household going on. So the boomers are really all over the place, presenting a lot of opportunities. And it's definitely an ongoing story. The last thing I'll touch on is the silver tsunami that you mentioned, Bernie, and we've covered this quite extensively on the show. It's something that we've been talking about for years. We work a lot with home builders, developers, home builder associations, and this is a massive concern. This is a so the silver tsunami essentially just means silver being gray hair and gray beards, Bernie, exactly, gray mustaches, Fred. You know, this is when we see mass retirement, and I mean, like, so much retirement that is actually double-digit retirement over the next 20 years, where we are gonna see a lot of these journeymen, a lot of these Red Seal tradespeople, which is the main concern, leave the industry. I'm talking, you know, steam fitters, plumbers, HVAC, electrical, all of the stuff that we need to actually make the world go round, to actually build the infrastructure that creates and allows real estate to operate. They're all retiring and they have not trained or backfilled enough young people in order to do this. This is why you've actually seen the quality of work in a lot of cases go down.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. You're absolutely right, and the tradespeople that I've come across have said that the younger generation, to them anyways, just aren't interested in that type of manual work because the young
Yeah.
lads, and I when I'm saying young, those, you know, your age and younger who decide to enter
Thank you.
into a trade, the ones that have been overwhelmingly successful. You know, when you're talking about
Totally.
electricians, like, it's amazing how, and it's because there's a real lack of interest. People don't look at that as a viable way to make a living. They're too caught up, quite frankly, sitting behind their screens and don't know the first thing about, but now we're getting into a personal opinion.
Well, I mean, look, you're right, Fred. I mean, you know, I come when I moved here from Vancouver. I grew up in a bit of a like spent my high school years in a kind of a smaller town. A lot of my buddies from back there are trades guys. It was a normal thing for half these guys or more to go. You know, going to university and you know being a desktop warrior, keyboard jockey, whatever you want to call it. That was almost like, why would you do that kind of thing? And it's really changed in the last decade or so. I'll tell you right now, all those guys are business owners. They have time off. They spend with their families. You know, they're the kind of people with a cottage and snowmobiles, and you know they're doing financially a lot better than a lot of the other people I know that kind of went into the corporate world that are stressed about AI now. That you know the ability to make money is capped by how fast you can move up in a large company. Whereas if you go and be a plumber, you know, you apprentice for a couple of years, essentially going to school and getting paid for it at the same time. You know, you're also around what I see a lot of trades guys doing is they're also around a lot of other trades guys. So
Yes.
they go and they start buying real estate together. And guess what? They can do all the renovations and stuff way cheaper. You know, many of my clients that are involved in some kind of trade, whether it even be, you know, more obscure like a roofing or demolition or something like that, they're still in that network. They're still on site. They still understand it. So I urge more and more young people, and we've done
Yeah,
even like some kind of charitable work around this kind of stuff that really trying to get young people to consider trades. And let me
for
tell you,
sure.
as a guy that wore a suit for a long time, it's not that sexy. Okay, ties suck. You know, wearing a suit in the middle of summer. You know, there's something about being on site and being able to work your way up. And by the time you know you're in your mid 30s, you can very well be a business owner.
For sure. Shout out to tradespeople and those considering becoming tradespeople because you're right. Silver tsunami, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, those are the people that are going to make a real difference, particularly to the real estate investor. You touch base just briefly, and I know this is we're changing horses here a bit about the you said you did a fair bit of work with the CMHC Select program. Can you explain to our listeners a little more about that program? It would be brilliant to have your, like, hands-on perspective.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I touch this stuff every day. It's a ton of the work we do. So first of all, CMHC is not a lender; they are a federal insurance agency, and they've designed a product called CMHC MLI Select. That is mortgage loan insurance. That's what MLI stands for. And this program kind of came on the market 3 and a bit years ago, maybe something like that.
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
Yeah, and you know, it hit the ground running. Those that were early adopters are doing and have done extremely well. It's amazing to me that a lot of people still don't know about it in the country. But this is a program designed for 5 units or more, okay? So if you have 5 units in a building all the way up to several hundred units in a building, you can get incredible financing. And what this product does, and it's kind of cool, they've kind of gamified it a little bit, if you will. Okay, so it's a points based system. The points are derived from accessibility, affordability, and energy efficiency. So if you meet certain metrics, check certain boxes within any one of those categories or a combination of those categories, you can get anywhere from 50 to 100 points. Those points allow you to get things like 95% loan to value, 95% loan to cost, 50-year amortizations, and some of the lowest lending rates that exist on the market. And that is all because CMHC's main goal. And by the way, CMHC is amazing. You know, we've had them on the podcast several times. They sponsor our events. They do really great work over there. It's actually the only profitable government agency. Okay, take that in for a second. That's the only profitable government agency. Ridiculous. But so they've been doing really great work outside of all the data and papers that they publish. They have designed this insurance product, and of course, they've got many other products. But this one has been really popular across the country. We're doing deals using this product from Vancouver all the way through Calgary and Edmonton, all the way over to, of course, Ontario and the East Coast. So it just allows developers and it allows citizen developers, this kind of new category that we're seeing emerge. The what we were just talking about, that homeowner that owns a piece of property in a city, and it's like, and all of a sudden that's up zones to 5 or 6 or 8 properties, or 8 units, sorry, as of right. Well, that person can now turn into a real estate investor and a developer if they bring in the right team. Now, of course,
Yep.
there's stipulations, there's net worth requirements, there's liquidity requirements, there's experience requirements. So you actually need to be able to prove that you are experienced enough. If you want CMHC construction, you need to have, construction and project management and property management experience. So this isn't a program for anybody. And there's a lot of unfortunate kind of bad advertising going on around this program. We've done a lot of kind of myth busting episodes, and that's why we're on this bit of a crusade to make sure that this program isn't abused like the MERB program was. There's realtors are desperate right now. People are desperate right now to look for the next deal. The condo market is absolutely terrible. Pre-construction market is absolutely terrible. So what are people doing? They're now looking at this program, and you see advertisements on Instagram or whatever, own this 30 unit building in Edmonton for $10,000 or for almost no money down kind of thing. And it's like, well, there's elements of truth
Yeah.
to that, but they don't tell you that you need, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, or that you need
Yeah.
a bunch of team members in order to make that happen. So that's a little
So
bit of a synopsis on MLI.
so is that program lend itself nicely to conversions where you have an office building and you want to convert it into
Yeah.
residential?
So I have not done a conversion deal myself. One of my partners at Build Financial has. I believe it was one of them was an old church, and then one of them was an older, kind of more industrial style building. Old office, you could say, very old office. Yeah, I mean, look, if you hit those metrics, you get the funding. If you can check all those boxes, you get the funding. Now, of course, there are, a million and one documents. Like this process is extraordinarily document heavy. There's all these jokes. They want your leg and your firstborn child, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But that should be the case if you're getting those types of terms, right? I mean, 95% on a large building that still cash flows in a lot of cases is pretty incredible. Now, we also make the joke that anyone that does this is going to be a very popular grandparent because your amortization's 50 years, but that's okay, right? Real estate is meant to be held for the long term.
It can be generational, absolutely.
Well, just going back to that program. So if you were looking to get into it and you kind of fit the profile, is this something you do as a joint venture? Like you were talking about your buddies, that work the trades and going, let's build something, right? And and they're going to build it right, and they're going to build it well, and it meets the criteria. Is that something as a joint venture that be a good way to approach it, as opposed to being a solo? I'm here, honey.
Yeah, that's a great question. I probably see, interestingly, about half and half. Some of my clients are quite wealthy. Some of them are very knowledgeable and sophisticated real estate investors, and they do this stuff alone on title. Now, from a partnership perspective, I look at everyone on my power team in real estate as partners of mine. Power team being your core group of people you need to get anything done, your mortgage broker, your real estate agent, your appraiser, your lawyer. and the list goes on and on, your contractor, et cetera. You need some of those people in order to get this transaction done. So if you have the money, that's great. You still need to hire someone that has the experience in order to do this. So I see clients doing that, but I also see in more cases than I have before, partners getting together, right? And this could be a homeowner and a contractor partnering together. This could be a couple young people that are pooling their funds and starting a corporation, and the corporation guarantees it, and then they personally guarantee it, and they all make decent money, and they can pull one of these smaller projects off, and then they roll that into the next one, they roll that into the next one.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but a lot of people are partnering on this stuff for many different reasons, whether it be experience or finances, of course.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about co-tenancies, which essentially is an organized partnership,
Yeah,
and we've been expounding the advantages of that for years and years. I've probably put 35, 40 of them together, and very often
nice.
there are investors who haven't that wouldn't have known each other until they actually met on a
Yeah.
project. But it's it's very property specific, very, very property specific. So I really want to move along here. We don't have you all day, and I really want to take advantage of your time. So tell us about Land Bank.
Yeah, so Land Bank is it was kind of the first brokerage that we started. It's still operational. I'm no longer a part of it. It's a more of a consulting arm at this point, but it was myself and a couple partners who were buying a ton of property back in the day, building a portfolio, and we all had mortgage expertise, and we decided to start that. That kind of led me to the path I'm on right now, which is at Build Financial, where we specialize. And this was kind of what I've always been doing. It's just at a bit of a different scale now. We help investors scale, simply put, right? So if you're looking to buy, sell, refinance, or develop any type of real estate project, now, back then I would do just about anything. Nowadays, I'm really focusing on the larger stuff, the multifamily, mixed use, industrial, et cetera. But it's at Build. It's great. We've got a team of amazing team of people, dedicated analysts, dedicated CMHC specialists, and a team of just rock star, dedicated, very sharp individuals that service clients across the country.
So you actually will finance or look at a project right across the board, right across Canada, and you have two offices now.
We've got two offices. We're expanding slowly, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
It's interesting. The land bank component, and we hear about Toronto, we hear about Vancouver. They're the big metropolitan areas. Is there any new areas that people should be paying attention to? Even with the new infrastructure bills, your infrastructure that the government, the feds are putting into play, right? Because all of a sudden we're putting a highway where there's no highway before. That sounds like opportunity. Is that something that's up and coming, or is there an area right now that's even sweeter?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very nuanced answer because it really depends on what your investment thesis is, right? If you are, for example, one of our first investment thesis, we had a portfolio of about 80 units under this thesis was buying below replacement cost. Okay, so we picked a couple sub markets. Fred Bram show would be familiar with the likes of Cornwall, Ontario, North Bay, Sudbury, those types of places,
Yeah, yeah.
and we were able to build a really great portfolio there. And what buying below replacement cost means if I look at a piece of land that has a duplex on it, even if it's not that nice of a duplex, and maybe I wouldn't live in it. And I'm not talking slumlord. We were never like that. We treated all of our tenants with respect and operated a tight ship. But what that means is if you how much would it cost me to buy that piece of land and build something on it and make the same amount of money? Right. So it was a long term play, as tenants turned over, as homes got if we had an empty unit, we would do a massive renovation. We'd buy stuff that was on larger lots that could be potentially redeveloped at some point. But that was just one of my investment thesis. Maybe your investment thesis is looking for where defense contracts are going. You know what I mean? Like some places on the East Coast and investing there. Maybe it's where the boomers are going, and you're looking to maybe go and start to try to buy or build retirement communities. Maybe you're kind of more that luxury investor and you want to do something like a sexy Airbnb. Okay, well, go find cottage country. Find a really nice building in a major metropolitan somewhere in Canada. It totally depends on what you are trying to do. I mean, I know people doing deals and through different investment strategies in almost all the markets across Canada. And if you pick them up and took that strategy and that person and put them in a different market, they might not succeed. So, it really is a question of who you are, what you're trying to do, how
Your
well
comfort
thought out
level.
that
Yeah,
investment, yeah, how well thought out that investment thesis is and the people around you. Canada is a very interesting place because it's so large. There are many different rules and regulations that govern the different provinces and even down to the different municipalities. It can be different. Everything from commission sales to landlord tenant acts and
for
boards
sure, for
to,
sure.
the amount you can raise rent, just, to operate in an Airbnb or short-term rental, just all these different things. So, it's so personal and location specific.
Well, to make a general comment. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would urge anyone to just really figure out what your why is, what your investment thesis is, and it starts to get easier to pick a market when you start to get clear on your goals.
Yeah, I love that term investment thesis. Really. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. So, along those same lines, tell us about clearing because this I found very interesting when I was doing my research. Tell us about clearing analysis paralysis, particularly what is it? And is there one particular mental shift that separates investors who take action from those who spend years getting ready?
Yeah, honestly, thank you for asking that question, Fred. That is such an important question for not just people in real estate, but anybody. Man, like I've started many businesses and most of them have been failures or failures in some capacity. They all experience success, of course, but I'm not sitting here talking to you from a private island in a mansion or anything like that. I haven't made it like that yet. And of course, every business I thought I was going to. The number one reason people fail, whether it be in business or in real estate, which is, of course, should be run like a business, is just not starting. And that's what analysis paralysis is. Okay. Analysis meaning I'm thinking about it. I'm working on it. I'm writing a new investor deck. I'm rejigging the business plan. I'm making a couple upgrades to the product. It has to be perfect because people are going to laugh me out of here if I present the imperfect widget or the not polished service or whatever it may be. Completely false. It's actually quite the opposite. Most people love to see other people try something. Unfortunately, in my experience, some of the people closest to you actually won't be your biggest supporters, and that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs have to get through. But analysis, trying to perfect something, and then paralysis is obviously not being able to move, not being able to do anything or act. So those two words together really describe what a lot of people suffer from when they try to start something, whether it's a t-shirt company or a private equity firm. But for most people trying to start out, whether it's buying your first investment property, starting your first little business, or even just going and like knocking on doors and trying to find a deal, or even going to like a real estate networking event. It's just that fear, and that is something that I've tried to dedicate the last several years of my life. Something that I've never had, for better or for worse, and and it's something that I've made it a mission of mine to try to break that mold that people kind of get into. I was at one of our events. This guy was like, he's in his mid 40s, and he's like, you know what? I think I'm finally gonna buy a property. I'm like, that's amazing, good for you. And I was like, you just getting into real estate? What's going on? He had a kind of a quote unquote normal job, whatever. I can't remember what he did, but he was like, my wife gave me the go ahead 20 years ago to buy something. I just couldn't find anything. I couldn't pull the trigger. And houses in this market back then were like 100 grand or less in some cases. And 20 years later, I looked at him and I was like, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. If you had even bought one property every 5 years, 20 years ago, you'd have a net worth of over $1 million now. If you had bought one property every 2 or 3 years,
Absolutely.
or if you'd gotten aggressive about it, you would be in a entirely, and I didn't mean to ruin this guy's night, but I could see the sparkle in his eye kind of lose a little bit. And, I just think it's about taking that risk, like what is the worst that can happen? Go get a job, go live with your parents, go sleep in your car for a week if you have to, like the absolute worst case scenario is never as bad as the best case scenario could be. And I like to live by a couple quotes. I think one of the most powerful quotes for entrepreneurs or would be entrepreneurs, people who are thinking about getting started, is entrepreneurs and investors and the people that take that little bit of risk are willing to live a few years of their life like most people won't, so that they can live the rest of their lives like most people can.
That's very good. That's good. That's very thoughtful. But no, I come across I come across this all the time. And I find that a lot of people, quite frankly, potential investors or even current investors want to be taken by the hand through the process. And I find the one thing when I'm making a presentation regarding a potential investment for a co-tenancy group, I find the more information I have tends to alleviate that stress or anxiety level. It helps them make the go, no go type of decision that we're looking for. So I always try to go into these investor meetings being exceptionally well prepared because there are so many people out there, as you said, that are just they're paralyzed by fear or uncertainty. And
Uncertain.
to
Totally.
have an entrepreneurial spirit is really, I think every business person should adapt that attitude or that philosophy. But it's not wrong to suggest that even entrepreneurs need mentors. They don't have all the answers. They may have plans. So I think the key for a lot of our listeners out there, because the vast majority of our listeners are real estate investors or want to be real estate investors, is again, as you so beautifully said, you need to have your core group. I mean, we're always touting the fact that you need to create your team before you turn around and invest in your first property. You can't have all the answers to every question, to any situation that may come up, but create and develop your team beforehand. And that way you can go to them and have a meaningful discussion. And what, again, again, I'm going to say it again, if there are no problems,
There are no opportunities.
that's right. So, you have to take a look at these. You can't be fully expected to have all the answers. But by listening to your podcast and, to ours and seeking out those individuals who have the knowledge that maybe you just haven't garnered yet. Because the other thing we are very fond of saying is that experience is the best teacher. And it's so true because you may not have all the answers on the first go, but the second one, you'll have pretty close to all the answers. And if you don't, maybe it might take your third or fourth. But remember, experience is your best teacher.
Well, Nick, if I have $100,000 in a bag and I'm going, I want to park it somewhere. Where do you recommend I go parking it? Well, with me, of course, says Nick. But
How do I get a
what's the
bag like that?
well, you go to the bank. No, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of great opportunities in the market right now. I mean, 100,000 is just enough to do something somewhat meaningful. From a stock market perspective, I have been a pretty bad investor, to be honest. So I just go put it in the S&P 500 probably. If you are into crypto, go ahead and go do that to diversify. I actually lost all my crypto in a Spanish casino about 2 a.m. all these years ago. So it's a story for another time.
There's a podcast topic.
Yeah, that one might be a little more, heavily rated than the usual stuff I put out, but, from a real estate perspective, $100,000, that's more than enough to go and probably buy yourself if you qualify, of course, but that's more than enough money to go and buy a kinda starter duplex, if not even a triplex in some markets across the country, something that's priced 500,000-ish, right? And having that 20% down. Lots of markets across the country that I love. I love the smaller mid to smaller up and coming markets. I've always loved the cash flow investing play, not
Yeah.
as focused on appreciation, but trying to force appreciation where I can. So I think $100,000 can get you pretty far in a lot of markets. Obviously prairies and East Coast primarily. If you were to take the route that we were discussing earlier, Bernie, with partnerships, $100,000, you become a somewhat attractive partner. You can go and LP that into a number of different funds. You can go put 100 grand into a MIC, a mortgage investment corp, and let someone else kind of do it. If you want to be a bit more of an active investor, go find a couple other people with 100 grand or more and go and partner and buy a bigger building. So, I think there's a lot of good ways to deploy 100 grand right now, or, you know, just YOLO it and go buy a Ferrari and a couple of jet skis or something.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Huh.
So I want to finish up with this question because you hit on a couple of really important points to our listeners. Secondary markets, which I'm a big fan of, forced appreciation. Again, I'm a huge fan, and most of our plans when they come to co-tenancies revolve around those two because I think that's where the greatest amount of opportunity lies for the basic investor or for an investor who maybe wants a little better return than an inflationary return. But one of the things I came across in my research was something that you referred to as house hacking. Tell me what it is, and is it still an effective investment strategy given today's market conditions?
More effective than ever. And I say that because it is now, I think, open to more people than ever. So house hacking, I didn't come up with it. It's not something that I invented. It's actually something that I personally haven't done. I tried to, it didn't work out. Something that multiple of my real estate investing partners have done. And it's probably one of the best ways to get started in real estate investing. The difference becomes when you go for your mortgage or to buy an investment property. Okay, so if I'm a young person, I'm going to buy my first house and there's a basement suite, or I'm just going to buy a duplex. Well, if you're buying it as an investment property, you need $20,000 down. Okay, if you are buying it as a owner, someone who's going to live in that property, you need as little as 5% down. Now, I usually tell people to put a bit more than 5% down because that basically means you're paying the bank rent in a lot of cases, but you can get into it with very, very little money. And what you do is you choose to live in either one of the sides or one of the units, or even I've seen people do it in the basement and they rent out the nicer, larger unit, the main floor. And guess what? Not only does this usually cover your mortgage in its entirety, but you're likely making money off of this thing too. So you are now a homeowner, an investment property owner that is living for free. Now, I say that it's expanded and kind of become more of an opportunity because this goes back to the multi-unit stuff right now, right? If you are house hacking, if you are living in one of these units and you've got 4 other units in the home, you still get a ton of benefits. So I think house hacking is one of the most overlooked ways to do it. The biggest pushback I've gotten when I tell people to do this, realistically, a lot of our audience is younger men, so I tell young guys to do this, and I hate to throw the wives and the girlfriends under the bus here, but they're like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, my wife or girlfriend does not want me living in the basement with, a tenant above. This is supposed to be our house," kind of thing. And I totally get that. Okay, so, it is a lifestyle change. The excitement of owning your own home and, blah, 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 that can diminish a little bit if you've got a tenant upstairs or downstairs or beside you or whatever it may be. But from a financial standpoint, from a building wealth standpoint, from pressing the fast forward button a little bit, it is huge.
absolutely. It's a great first step for any fledgling investor as well. And I've had investors do just that. And as a matter of fact, one of our guests, most current guests, relatively well off gentleman, he bought a very attractive 7 unit. And he didn't take the grand suite, and he took I think the second level, which had a portion of the first, and he's raising 2 kids, and, he's done exceptionally well for himself. So, it all depends, you're right on I think it has more to do with the mental attitude, and we didn't
Yeah,
touch
it's
base
usually
on it.
one of the spouses, well, the husband or the wife is usually
Yeah.
against something like that.
Yeah,
But if
for
you can pull
sure.
it off and if you can convince each other it's a good idea, it is worth it, at least for a couple of years.
So I have one question which we didn't discuss before, but the one thing that I find very, very frustrating today, and one of the reasons why, and you started to discuss it earlier in the podcast, had to do with why the market is like it is. I think I had posed the question. But what I'm finding is that there's more although, some people would argue we're not technically in a recession. Although I think those of us out there on the street would suggest we've been, as you said, in a recession for quite some time. But I think it has more to do with it's more mental than it is actual. And in the sense, what I'm saying is that people have got this there. I think you know what I'm probably speaking about. It's the attitude or the general premise that
Sentiment.
I mean, how do you I mean, what's the answer to that? What's it going to take to turn that attitude around outside of
Um,
a complete, shake up down south, which I think has a lot to do with it, but what's it going to take? What do you think?
I mean, the unfortunate, very simple, almost one word answer is time, unfortunately,
Oh,
which I know most people don't want to hear. I think there needs to be a lot of policy changes. We suffer from, especially from a real estate perspective. I'll just speak real estate terms right now. Our permitting process here is the slowest in the world outside of literally, and I'm not kidding, Slovakia, which almost is like brutal irony, okay? Slovakia and like our it is
yeah,
ridiculous, okay? The red tape that real estate investors, developers, business owners have to face is quite frankly just unacceptable in a lot of cases. I have clients that just waited 18 months for a permit.
oh,
It's just ridiculous. I think Canadians have been on a roller coaster. We went right from the pandemic right into interest rates going to, absolute record lows, being everyone being locked inside to then people being let loose and market going wild and, rates shooting back up, immigration skyrocketing and then plummeting, vacancies being almost, at all-time lows to now, creeping up to in some cases, 6% in certain markets, which is crazy. Rents skyrocketed. Rents are softening across the board.
yeah.
Who wants to do anything in that market? It's a disaster. One day it's this, one day it's that, one day it's this, the next month is this, next it's the people
One
like to be
after the
certain.
other. Yeah,
Exactly. If people like to have a little bit of boring is good. Okay. Everyone likes excitement, of course, but in business and real estate and economics, boring usually means good. And we have not had a boring market. We've had bear, bull, kangaroo market. It's been bouncing all over the place. So I think Canadians need to kind of settle in I think that we're kind of grinding for the next 2 years, kind of in and around where we are right now, maybe a little bit worse. Maybe it starts to get a little bit better, but I don't think we're in like recovery territory for, a couple years. And I don't think recovery means, ripping bull market, multiple offers, 0% interest rates, all that kind of BS again. I really hope it doesn't. I think we needed a bit of a healing period and we're in that right now, right? That the party's over and the hangover's kicked in. And from, top down, I mean, there's just a lot of issues here in Canada. Taxes, permits, zoning, again, I don't want to
yeah,
get
there are.
too opinionated or political here, but I think we can all agree things need to change. And I can't help it. I'm an eternal optimist. I hope they will. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing right now a lot of municipalities getting the message. I mean,
Yeah.
being led by at least the Ontario, the provincial premier, about, you know, addressing just the issue that you spoke about. Now, this is only one area, one territory. Municipalities are notoriously slow to get what needs to be done, but I absolutely echo your sentiments. So thank you so much. That's been brilliant. We're not going to let you off the hook yet. We got some
Uh-oh.
rapid fire Q and A's. They don't need big answers.
All right.
Let's our audience find out a little more about you.
So, Nick, what are you reading right now? What's piqued your interest?
I actually saw this question. I was like, damn it, I got to think of a book. I used to read books quite a lot. I'm a big audiobook podcaster kind of guy these days. I read an extraordinary amount of data and studies and reports and emails and research for podcasts and all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I'm taking a bit of a sabbatical on reading right now. I try to pick up a book here and there, and I just can't find the time to get through it. So, what I will say is I really did enjoy a lot of the real estate classics, of course, but outside of real estate, Malcolm Gladwell is always someone that I really enjoyed reading, and
Sure.
the
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Robert Greens of the world too. So bad answer, but that's all I got.
No, no, Malcolm Gladwell's. I've read all his recent books, anyways. So I hear you. So in your you may not be reading anything right now, but did you ever have a favorite book?
Fourth Turning was probably the last book I read, and that was really, really eye opening. I don't know if it'd be my favorite. I don't know if I've got a favorite book, to be honest. I don't think
Boy,
so.
so far it's a wash, Bernie. What are we gonna do with
Well,
this one? You gotta be able to answer.
yeah,
Okay, okay.
because reading is one thing, but eating, we all have to eat. Do you have a favorite meal?
No, I do. Pasta. I, Italian. We just got back from Italy about a month or 2 ago. I'm headed back in 2 months. I love pasta. I'll take any and all types of pasta.
Any particular one that you really like that if you saw on a menu, you'd say, "I gotta have this"?
Yeah, I mean, carbonara in Rome is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, that I can believe. That I can believe. So, what's your favorite alcoholic beverage?
I love a nice crispy beer, but I'm trying not to be fat, so I'm on the tequila sodas right now.
Tequila soda diet. Tequila so that's good. You heard it first right here. Tequila soda diet. I like that.
Well, if you're having a tequila soda, what what's the perfect circumstance? What's the perfect day? Is that with the tequila soda or
Yeah, well, perfect day, just perfect day in general, honestly. I love getting up early when I can, having a bit of a slow morning. If I had an opportunity to do a bit of an outdoor workout in whatever capacity and then do a sauna or a steam room and a cold plunge, I know it sounds probably super annoying for some people, but I literally just love that stuff. I'm half Italian, half Swedish, so I've been in the sauna since I was a little kid. That would be the perfect start to day. And then, see friends, see family, and probably make a couple calls and try to get a deal done because I love that stuff too.
Man, sounds great. Do you have a favorite place in the world to visit? Now I know you just came back from Italy, so give me another place.
Yeah, outside, I'm gonna keep this like super local here. My family has a kind of family cottage on the Manitoulin Island, largest freshwater island in the world. Absolutely beautiful, very
Yeah,
much a hidden gem. I've been going up there since I was 12 years old. I've done a lot of traveling all over the world. I absolutely love it up there. I love northern Ontario. I love cottages
beautiful.
and
Yeah,
just
beautiful.
being up there and the quiet and the nature
Yeah,
and the feeling that you get. So I'll say the Manitoulin Island.
beautiful. Sounds as good as any other place. Ernie, take us home.
so do you have a favorite type of ice cream?
Pistachio gelato.
There.
Sounds Italian. Sounds Italian.
Ah, geez, I don't know why, but yeah. There you go. Nick, thank you for being our guest today. I'm sure there'll be all sorts of questions for you. Where can our listeners find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I really appreciate you gentlemen having me on. Really great conversation and love what you guys are doing. I'm fairly easy to get a hold of. Instagram would be at my buddy Nick. You add me, we're buddies, my buddy Nick. LinkedIn, Nick Hill. And then if you want to send me an email, you're interested in any of the more professional stuff we spoke about, Nick, Nick, at bldfinancial.ca. Shoot me an email there.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Anything you care to add, Bernie?
Another thing I would add, Nick, what is your podcast name? How do they
The
find your
Canadian
podcast?
Yeah, thank you so much. The Canadian Real Estate Investor Podcast, bit of a mouthful, but we tried to make it as SEO friendly and self-explanatory as possible. We actually just hit over 400 episodes, which is pretty cool. Goal is to get to 1,000 and an immense amount of value. It's been a massive amount of work for us, but something we truly love. You can find it anywhere: YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Go check it out. It'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think our conversation today has been most enlightening. Understanding what CMHC has to offer, and if you go knocking on the door, that's really a great thing to understand that whole profile. Understanding what's happening in the market, and there are hidden gems everywhere. So even house hacking. I'm thinking of someone on a computer right now, but it's more than
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's a relatively new term for, well, what most people always did, so but I
Exactly,
love the
yeah.
moniker for sure. Yes, it's been very, very interesting. I really hope you'll consider coming back and revisiting us, Nick, because this has
Would
been
be
a great
honored.
conversation. That's great to hear.
So, folks, if you're listening to this show, you can sign up for the Property Wise newsletter. In it, you'll find the latest investment opportunities, links to your favorite podcasts, all with a little bit of education thrown in, and the cost, the time it takes to listen up and sign up. So, and if you have questions or comments, reach out to us at info@gentryres.com. That's info at GENTRYRES.com.
Again, thank you listeners for tuning in, and remember, If there are no problems,
There are no opportunities.
have a great week.
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.